Oh, we got a great show today, man. Teacher pay at 140K. You know what? I don't even want to do the music today, man. Let's just jump into it. Fellas, how y'all doing today?
Oh, he's just jumping in, not even an
I know.
intro.
You know what I thought
Love it.
about it? I got
I
the
love it.
because we have the new video and then the old
Ah,
video, but with the
we got that new
getting stuff switched
hotness.
in. We do got some new hotness that we will be sharing with the
Man, I love
people.
that new
But
hotness, man. To the peoples.
I did kind of just want to get into it. I had the stuff set up. I didn't mean to throw you all a curveball, but this issue of teacher pay has always been something. It's always been a thing around how much teachers get paid, and I don't think that we disagree on the topic for the most part, right? Like that, yeah, great educators do deserve to get paid better. But there was an article that had come out that we had looked at. I can pull up the article, but if one of you gentlemen want to just kind of preface it, I think that would be kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, go for it,
Go
David.
for it. Okay.
None.
So we're talking about a public charter school in New York City, right? It is called
Indeed.
the Equity Project, TEP, and they were actually in the news quite some time ago. I was looking to see if it was the same school, but I remember back in 2011 they were in the news when they launched an experiment to pay teachers 125,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, that was 10 years ago, and so inflation, and what cost of living, and now they are looking at $140,000 teacher salary going into next school year. So this is what we're talking about. Big money in New York City.
Mm-hmm. So
No
that just
whammies.
brings
No whammies.
well, that brings some questions up right now. I mean, I'm curious just to get you all's take, right? Like, so Omar, and I know we didn't jump in to see how people was doing and all that good stuff. I just want we been running out of time. I wanted to just get back to it and talk to y'all, but and I'm just exhausted. It's just an exhausting week. But Omar,
why don't you start us out on quick check-ins, Doc? Why are you so exhausted? What's going on?
man, just we be checking in. I just be like, yo, let's just get to it, man. But you're right. You are that is very SEL of you, Omar, and I appreciate it. You know what I'm saying?
I gotta support you, man.
Our social emotional. No, it's fine, man. It's just work stuff. Things are just busy. It's just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of partners in the middle of this merger, which for Energy Converters, which will be honoring a good friend of mine and Davis, Dirk Tillison. We are almost done in that process, and it's nothing bad. It's just been very busy and kind of going nonstop. And this conversation is where I get to let some air out the tires a little bit. I can take a little bit of that off and just joke around with some friends around some and have some serious and good conversation around education that we don't really see happening very often. So that's what that is. But since you have restored order and said, nah, let's do a check-in. Just for the record, Omar and David, if we ever are doing work, I am not the icebreaker guy. I think icebreakers are dumb. I think they are a waste of company time. I think they are corny and cheesy for the most part. But I just like getting into it, man. But fellas, go ahead, and then we will bring up and come to this topic that I do really want to dive into.
Yeah, man. David, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Let's see. The weather has finally shifted, and we have hot weather now, which is great. So it feels like spring is here, and summer will be here soon. A school-related story. I think I sent you all a picture of from this event that I was at last weekend. My son does jiu-jitsu, and he was in a tournament that was at a San Diego area public high school. This is just a regular public high school. Mm-hmm. And it was incredible, to see the disparities in terms of facilities, what some students have to deal with and communities have to deal with versus what we got to see. This amazing gymnasium. I think I sent you a photo of that. it was incredible. And so my wife and I were talking about it, and she said it doesn't have to be like this. And I'm like, nope, these are all human created problems. And we talk about how we fund our schools. So that's my school story. Like I said, it's getting hot down here in San Diego, so I'm looking forward to jumping in the pool this weekend. That's what I got.
Is Nelly also in San Diego, letting everybody know that it's getting hot in there?
Okay, there we go.
If we were worried that Omar was gone or there was things happening, we have our Omar back. How are you doing, brother? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego today?
I'm in this beautiful blank void, as you can see. So I'm like a minimalist, and I love to be able to jump around place to place. So I'm in our central offices for our organization, but our team who's usually here, they have the nice offices. I'm like, I don't need a nice office. I just need a small little place because I like jumping from place to place. So minimalist situation. Shout out to all of those superintendents and minimalists who aren't spending an extravagant amount of money on an office that they're not into, and hopefully using that money to support teachers and able to pay them apparently what's $140,000 a year. But other than that, no, listen, man, like I feel like I'm coming out of what's been a bit of a personal slump. Like things are really good work-wise, but it was too much work. And I think I neglected myself, my health, my mental health, and I'm jumping back into that rebalance, and I'm feeling better and better and better and kind of coming back to life. So for those of you out there that are workaholics like the three of us, it catches up with you eventually. Take some time to yourself. Make sure that you do the things that make you happy, but also things that will help progress you and help you grow as a human. Therapy included if needed, because that's some good shit out there. I am a labeled self-diagnostic, and I do a lot of my own therapy. I do the therapy as well. So I'm all for it, Doc. I'm feeling better, man. Thanks for checking in on me.
Man, well, that was you that made that happen. But I appreciate that. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. And this topic, right? Like, so again, people talk about teacher pay. They've talked about it for my entire life, probably you all as well. It has always been an electric conversation, and on the surface it's pretty simple, but it does have its layers to it, and we'll probably talk about some of those layers. So in the gist of what I heard you saying is that there's a charter school in New York that is experimented with just, hey, teachers want more pay, let's just pay them more, and then we can hold accountable and not have to feel bad about it. They started at 125. And I think teachers at the end of the year were eligible for a $35,000 bump if they, depend on their performance. And that same school is now proposing to do another raise to $140K, and so let's just get initial thoughts. Should other people be following this type of model? And David, let's kick it to you for reactions, and then you can take it from there, and I'll jump in.
Yeah, I think where my head goes is I want to see their budget, right? I want to see how they actually are able to do this. Most school funding, at least in the charter space, that don't necessarily have large oversized administrations, go to pay teachers. They pay your people, and that's most of the budget. And so I know in New York City, the per pupil funding is some kind of astronomical number, compared to California and probably compared to Texas. And so my head goes to, like, I want to see the budget. And that's my initial thoughts. I think, I think cost of living, I think place also has something to do with this. New York City is a very expensive place to live and to survive, and so I think that salary probably makes sense there, but I don't know about paying a teacher that kind of money if they're, say, working in Wichita, Kansas or something like that. That might need to be adjusted. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I mean, I kind of want to dig in a little bit more to see how they make it work.
Right, right. Oh, what was your initial thoughts when you saw this?
I mean, look, dude, who's gonna be like, we shouldn't be doing this? There's not an audience member here that's like, yeah, man, F those teachers. Like, pay them a hay penny, a cracker, and a balloon, which is literally what I think I got paid in my first year of teaching. They're like, oh, hey, you're a teacher. Here's a broken shoe, Oliver Twist. Go out there and put it into a stew and cook it. Like, I would love to pay teachers this much. And people will be like, well, Omar, why aren't you paying teachers this much? It goes to three things. And I want to reiterate what David said. The first thing is like, yo, I work with the budgets. I understand the budgets. That's a ton of money. And you're like, well, Omar, if you could pay your administrators this much, why can't you pay your teachers this much? And I want to answer that question. Of the three things, I do want to see their budget. How are they affording this? How much money are they getting every single year? Where is money being allotted to? Do they have a facility that's free? Like, are they paying in a debt service? Like, I'm fascinated because it's like, cool, like I'd love to pay teachers this much. But two big questions that I want to add to what David said. One, I want to see their work calendar. Meaning, there's, what were we talking about, David? Is there 360 days in a year? 365?
Yep.
Right. So we got your 185s, 95s, and I think I'm at like 225. And you're like, what the hell is that, Omar? I'm a 225 employee, meaning I am salaried. I work 225 days out of the year because you got weekends and some holidays and stuff. It's nice. Teachers are at like 185. So that already is a huge discrepancy in the amount of days that they're working compared to the amount of days I'm working. So if these teachers are working 225, if they're working year round, hey, I can dig, because you're probably asking them to do a heavier lift than a lot of other teachers are doing. And teachers are going to get pissed off. They're like, I'm doing a heavy lift. F you, Omar. And I'm like, yeah, word. Like, all right, cool. Teachers are martyrs in many respects. And I get it. It's a tough job. I was a teacher. I love teachers. That like being in a room full of teachers, it's a lot of like, woe is me, and I work the hardest. And it's like, no, I kind of want to see what their work calendar is like, but I want to see what their workload is like. Meaning, if they're working more days, that's one thing. What are they doing? If they're doing some heavy lift and being like, we're designing curriculum, we're doing inordinate data analysis, we're designing advisories where there's incredible data analysis going on, we're doing massive interventions, we're doing tutoring, it's like, yo, like, absolutely. Because now what you're doing is taking what is ultimately other people's, jobs or not professions, but like their workload, and being like, oh, you're putting that on the teacher, cool. So that saves some money, and you can push that over to the teacher, which gets to what David said is like, yeah, kind of wonder how they're figuring it out. I don't know. What was your take, Doc? You're a doctor, man. You studied this stuff.
I would just say, I mean, hey, I like proof of concept. So if this is a good proof of concept and you get to kind of explore it and see where the sacrifices were made, if you see a boost in productivity, if you see a boost in young people learning, I'm a scientist. I like seeing the experiment, find out what parts of it work, what parts of it doesn't. David introduced some new information that I'm gonna put on the screen in a second that will kind of help paint this picture. But I think that there's a deeper conversation even beyond this setting, right? Because I think that in education, we like to look at certain models without fully knowing. So I think Finland was the one that people would always use about how people get paid, what the school environment is like there, all those things. But here's the thing, right? And that's cool. But there's some other nuanced differences that the Finland crew has that you don't have to necessarily do, right? Like there's a certain level of the credentialing is a little bit different. There's a different set of stakes that's at play. And there are people there that are not happy with that system either, right? Like, so I think even in this, if you were to dig deep, whatever your narrative is, I think you can find, I think we live in a time now that however you feel, I don't think we're looking at information to help us form an opinion. I think that we're looking for information to help us confirm an opinion. And I think as a scientist, I don't know. I mean, if it works and that's that sauce and black kids and brown kids and poor kids are getting what they need, then I'm on that. I'll rock with it. If it's just a vanity play that's not really making a lot of difference or whatnot, and it's just adding to this continuous drone and vacuum of opinion that at the end of the day only helps out a few people and not the ones that we're making a spectacle about, then you can then we can have at it. And I want to just add this component from David. I'll change that so people can see everybody. New York's recent growth builds on its record per pupil spending, which is at $25,519 per pupil, which was already 89% higher than the national average at $13,000 in the school year. So I want to have this conversation, but we got to bring people along because people don't work in this field, right? So they just saw a lot of numbers. David, do you want to take a quick hit at this? And then Omar, you can jump in on but explain what those numbers just meant.
Man, take that hit, be somebody, baby.
Yeah. So so there's some other. It's in the article, but national average, I think for last year was something around $65,000, right? Mm-hmm. So then we're looking at New York City in particular. What is the rate again there? They're like $25,000 a student. So there's definitely some like big math at play. This is how they're able to afford this. I don't think it's not, you could not replicate this in other parts of the country. When I started in education, my first year teacher salary was like $33,000, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, our per pupil funding in California was a whopping $6,000 per kid, right? So you can see how the numbers have all kind of how they've expanded, and they need to expand. So I think this thing might be like an outlier. I don't know, but I do think I'd be interested to see like if you're paying teachers this amount of money, you obviously would expect to see higher retention, right? Mm-hmm. People staying on longer. You probably also want to see and associated with that is a longer average years of teaching. I think some of the charter schools, they kind of do this, they've done this thing where it's like it's a very young teaching force, right? But ideally you want people in the building that have been in the game for like 10 years, right? And then in addition to that, you would think that a more stable staff leads to a more stable student population, less students leaving the school. And then you could start to look at like outcomes, student outcomes. So I think those are all things in exchange for the money. You definitely want to know that there's an actual benefit at the end of the day for kids.
Absolutely. Oh, you muted. Oh, okay. There you go.
I keep going. Is it on? Okay, there we go. I keep going off and on mute. I think people I want to jump back to like the Finland thing, because I think people jump back to the Finland thing a lot, and they're like, this is like what's going on over there. Like I want to kind of reclassify that a bit, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. Like Finland, the United States is apples and oranges, and everyone's looking at that as a model and saying we should be doing this. And I'm like, look, the amount of money in Finland is bonkers, because like them in Norway and Sweden, they're dealing with a ton of oil money. They have like the population of Texas, not of the United States. It's an extraordinarily homogenized state. And look, kudos to them, because they've essentially like dealt with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, meaning like if your first need is like food or water, then food, then shelter, clothing. Dude, in Finland, like all those things are taken care of by the state. All of it, dude. Like it's badass. Like, you got a problem, move to Scandinavia, man. They will take care of you. They will take care of you. You got all those needs met. So when you have those needs met, and you're not dealing with poverty, you're not dealing with the stress of poverty, you're not dealing with the trauma of poverty, you're in a stable situation where kids only have to worry about school. And when you only have to worry about school, that is a beautiful place that I wish every child in this country and around the world had the opportunity to only worry about school. The reason it's apples and oranges is because in the United States, if you look at middle class and upper class kids and take their PISA scores, this is the international exam that we all take, PISA, to compare ourselves to countries around the world. So when people are like, hey, how do you know that like the United States is 36 in education in the world? It's according to this one exam, the PISA exam. And if you took middle class and upper middle class and upper class kids in the United States and compared them to the same economic demographic in Finland, we beat the shit out of Finland. We toast them on that score. And look, there's no wonder, dude. Why are all the best universities in the world, sans maybe Cambridge and Oxford in the United States? Why is everyone coming to Harvard and Stanford and Yale and all that stuff? We do really well when it comes to those upper middle class kids, those middle class kids, upper middle class kids. The problem with the United States, and it's a reason why the South Star Classroom exists, it's a reason why PLA exists, is that we have not solved low income education. That is the apples and oranges. We have an enormous low income population in this country that we have just absolutely forgotten about.
Yep.
So when we compare ourselves to this model in Finland, you can't, because they're doing something for a population that's essentially serving a middle, and upper class population. In the United States, we have not solved low income education. So perhaps one of the ways in solving this scenario is treating education radically different, meaning we're going to pay our teachers $140,000 to make it a profession that people are interested in going into. And perhaps even low income people, like for example, myself, who grew up low income, and David, you may have been in a similar situation, Doc, like it's nuts that we're in education. Because the majority of kids that grew up low income, dude, they're all like, you know, if they got an education, they're not in education. They're up like investment bankers and commercial real estate, because they're like, I don't want to deal with the poverty I dealt with as a kid, and I don't want my kids to deal with the poverty. So which of those kids go back into education? Those very kids that understand the circumstances of being low income, who should be in education, aren't, because we pay squat. So it's kind of dope to see, could you rally and get extraordinarily high quality people to get into high quality teaching positions, because the pay will be enough of a motivation to be like, hell yeah, dude, if only teaching paid more, I would do that. And it's like, I wonder if we increase teacher pay to a point where people who would otherwise be engineers or commercial real estate agents or investment bankers would make a switch decision and flood the teacher pool with so much talent that then we'd get the best damn educators in the building. Then maybe that's one huge way we'd solve the low income education crisis. But Doc, that's merely a hypothesis. So it's a hot take hypothesis. I don't know if it's proof of concept. It's just my idea on how to begin to solve this issue.
Well, look, like I said, man, I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's an interesting experiment. And no, I'm not saying that we are experimenting on young people. What I'm saying is that everything has a market. Everything has like, okay, this is the general how we can kind of make this work. And if there's some financial jujitsu that can happen that can make people's lives better in the process, by all means. I think these conversations end up having us really focusing on the adults in the situation, which you have to, right? You have, these people need to get paid. People need to get paid their fair wage or whatnot. But I would love to see, and it may exist, it may not. I don't know. All we have is this one article, but I would love to see baseline data. And then I would love to see it kind of longitudinally, like how that happens. And if you get something positive here, I would love to see that program kind of expand into where we have a clear group A, group B that we can kind of, look at over time. Like, this is the thing. We talk about education and we talk about logic and we're talking about trying to improve education. And we have stepped away from utilizing logic. Everything has become somewhat emotional, and that's not totally unwarranted, right? Like, there's a lot of injustices that have happened, a lot of things like where people have felt like they haven't been able to express their feelings or whatever. But here's the thing: every time there's a pendulum, and every time that pendulum is way on one side, and you drop it, it will overswing and overcorrect to the other side, and it takes time to sway in there. And I think that there has to be a place for feelings, emotion, and the things that come with that, but there also has to be a time for science, like the science of this is how this is happening, and also what would this look like in other places? How could this potentially be abused? And there are some places where 140 just isn't, it still isn't that much. Like San Francisco and New York tend to be one of those places where $140,000, and again, if you live in the middle of the country and you're like, what the hell is this kid talking about saying $140,000 isn't a lot of money? I feel you. And it is a lot of money to me. But in the grand scheme of things, in a place like San Francisco or NYC where things are skyrocketing up, it still isn't that much. That's why inflation is where it is. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything necessarily controversial about it. I will say this, and it'll take me to the next question I'll ask you all. If we were to raise standard pay, let's just play this game, and it was around 140, commiserate to where you live, right? So whatever the 140 equivalent is, like if you live in Wichita, what's the 140 equivalent versus if you live in Hawaii, what's the 140 equivalent? Can I now hold you to a different standard?
Right.
Now that is the question. Like, I'm very much curious about that.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is teachers have a job description. They have Omar was talking about this earlier. They work a certain number of days a year and certain number of hours, a day. And so what you're getting at is like, what's going to be different? Like, are we going to ask them to work longer days, work more days out of the year, do more professional development? I'm looking at some of I don't have any current data, but Charles, you brought up like the scientific piece. So we actually do in an earlier piece that came out, I think in 2000, and I don't know when it came out, a while ago. In the very first year of the school, the first 5 years, you actually see some pretty significant academic gains, but only in math. This is when they were paying teachers $125,000. So you saw like a different cohorts moving through, and the longer students were at the school, their what they call additional years of learning was kind of growing exponentially, but mainly focused on math. So that's like the one thing that at least back then 10 years ago showed that there were some impacts around student outcomes. But getting back to your point, like if you're going to pay this kind of money, it's not just an adjustment; it's an adjustment, but also like what are they going to ask teachers to do differently, right? I think that's a really good question. I think time, I think school day, I think number of days in the calendar would be expanded, and again, like more time in PD, which means more time doing collaboration with your colleagues. More time, planning with your colleagues around curriculum, and then, also parent engagement, really getting serious about parent engagement, parent communication, all those things that we know can be challenging in schools. So I would say definitely. I mean, I would love to see the job description for the teachers for this school.
And David, you went somewhere, you said, more would be added. My question was even simpler than that. Like, can I just hold you to a different standard of what's supposed to be happening now? Like, can I have a, hey man, let's say it's a 5th grade class and we take inventory and 30% of that class is on reading level. The other 50% is a grade behind, and then the last 20% is multiple grades behind. Like,
Yep.
If salaries get up to a place where people feel is respectable, to the point where it's desirable, can we then kind of start tying, certain things to said performance? I'm an NBA fan. Nick Nurse has been coaching the Toronto Raptors. Guess what? In 2020, he was, I think, coach of the year. And this year they didn't make the playoffs, and he was fired today. And he'll find another job, right? But there's no, you know what I'm saying? And this is going to be controversial, fellas. I got to tee this up because I know I got Omar on here. I got to tee this up though, because here's let me tee it up, right? Because here's the thing. Here's the dirty little secret, ladies and gentlemen. When you do a job that is considered honorable but with low pay, there is a certain threshold that people in general give you where you can complain, right? So listen, if you are I was an underpaid social worker, people might be a little bit more willing to hear, damn, this job is hard, it sucks, or whatever. If you are in a job that people don't deem very important but has a high level of pay, let's say I was a stockbroker, and then all these things where these atrocities were happening in the stockbroker market, and I was being cussed out by the Wolf of Wall Street every single day, and I got fired. Nobody really cares about that. So what happens is when you start to make the money that you deserve, let's say you make $250,000, that social strata, that social chart shifts. And I don't know if the same level of sympathy and empathy for the teaching profession will be there. And I do think that there will be more public outcry of wanting to see results. What I mean is you will be coach of the year in 2020, and in 2023 you will find yourself with a pink slip if one does not deliver. I don't know if that's controversial or not, but we always talk about it from a different place. So Omar, I would ask you, if you were paying your teachers 140, 200 grand, does your expectation of said teacher change?
The answer is both hell yes and hell no. Because the way you originally posited this question is, if we're paying them this much, should expectations be heightened? Hell yes. Me personally, I have these expectations of our teachers already, and you don't get to work at EPLA if you don't meet these standards and expectations, period. So when I say hell no, it's because sadly, I wish I was paying my teachers 140. We're not. We're increasing their teacher pay every single year. And I've had the most rapid teacher pay increase, arguably in the district, if not the state, because as we continue to grow, I'm notching it up, but absolutely not, dude. I've got insanely high expectations for our teachers. I do want to bring up a couple things that you brought up in terms of the controversy, but I want to bring up a controversy myself. Listen, my paradigm for teaching and coaching is so different from what I think is going on in schools across America. I was just having this conversation. Teaching's like a freaking fiefdom. It's like medieval times. It's just I got my classroom and my rules apply and I'm in charge. And it's you don't know what you're doing, dude. I know what I'm doing. I've been teaching for 17 years. You've been failing kids for 17 years. You don't know the first thing about exit tickets aligned to objectives, 5 at-bats, data prowess every single day. And if you do, that's badass. But the overwhelming majority of teachers would get lost in that conversation. If I told the overwhelming majority of teachers, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to observe, we're going to coach, it's not evaluative, it's just coaching, they'd be like, this is my classroom, you're not allowed in here. And most, if not every single school that's aligned with the unions would not allow that to happen. Which, gets me into more controversy because the unions are essentially stunting teacher growth because the unions don't actually give a shit about kids. They don't give a shit about teacher growth. They don't give a shit about accountability and ensuring that our kids are reading. They only give a shit about their power, and they only give a shit about being relevant, which they are not. Like, I would eliminate every single one of those unions immediately. They're worthless, and they've done nothing to help kids, and they've done nothing to help teachers grow and professionally grow them. So, we're paying teachers more because it should be an honorable profession that people get to live in, where they are taught and coached consistently to achieve something better. Now, I'm going to cut myself after this because I want to keep talking. The only amendment I would have with you, Doc, is if you're an English teacher and your kids scored out of this world on the English exam, how can you isolate that it was the English teacher that did that and not a social studies teacher or a literacy coach or somebody else? So all of a sudden, this English teacher that sucks shit is getting all the accolades, gets all the awards, and really it was the social studies teacher, the literacy coach, or the tutor that got that kid to that level. So my one interjection in what we do at the El Paso Leadership Academy is we actually do have a system of rewarding teachers for excellent results. But the way we do it is not isolated to the teacher, it's done through the team. So the entire sixth grade, if we see results jump up for the sixth grade class, we equitably give the sixth grade teachers that reward because they should all garner the credit for it, but then it makes them all accountable to those standards, including the damn PE teacher and art teacher. I got that PE teacher teaching reading, writing, literacy, comprehension, and critical thinking. Straight up. And you're like, and PE? I'm like, hell yeah. That's what debriefs are for.
Yeah, I mean, I have a nerdy answer before David goes. Here's a nerdy answer from
man, I like it nerding out, man. Nerd out, man.
One, you never
nerd
take,
out, baby.
You never take an isolated event and use that as the gospel, right? What you would have is you have different inputs and you have to triangulate that data. So is it like, okay, does this person have 60 kids and this is what their baseline was? If that's the only person that spiked, then convention would probably say, well, it probably wasn't all that person. But if that person saw a 60, 70, 80% spike and that differed from, you know what I'm saying, from other teachers, I think you can look at it that way. And I think the other thing is you would then say, okay, from this social studies class, we can still map and see if there was significant growth in that area. I told you, it gets real nerdy and wonky when you go down that way. The point is that there's a methodology that you can create. And again, if you are an amazing teacher, you deserve to get paid. Like, you deserve to be paid well. Like, I want to make sure, because people take your words when you don't say every single thing that they want to hear, you don't, or somebody doesn't fully agree with you, then they'll kind of demonize what you're saying. So let's just get out the way. Great teachers deserve to be paid. Great. The question for me is less about pay, and it is more about, I want to know at what price point can I now hold you accountable for the learning of students in your classroom and not be seen as evil. I am a black boy. I'm a black man who was a black boy who went to a bunch of schools where teachers were never held accountable for how well or poorly I was taught. And when anything happened, that union said, we are going to strike. When we're not getting the type of money we want, we are going to strike. When we want to have smaller classes, we're going to strike. And I'm not saying that any of those things are wrong. But you know who was not able to strike, even though they supported you? Kids and their parents. Kids and their parents couldn't walk down on the school and say, we are pulling all our kids out and you about to lose all this ADA.
Yeah. And they're about to do it, and they're about to do it again.
And we work in a place. David and I come from Oakland is about to go on strike again. I feel like every 3 months we are talking about a new strike that is happening. You know what I want to see? We are not talking about English test scores that well. We're not talking about reading like that. We're not talking about math like that. We're not talking about poverty like that. We are talking about these very capable adults and this very powerful entity. And I understand what the teachers union job is. See, this is the thing. People are enchanted and they're like, oh, a teachers union's job is to help kids and to serve kids. No,
hell no.
No, that is not what a
no.
union's job is.
No.
And I want to say this, and I say this with no animosity, because I'll use we still in basketball mode. I'll use the NBA Players Association. The job of a union is to protect its workers and advocate on behalf of its workers, not necessarily the stakeholders of said workers, but said workers. That's their job. That is what is written in their charter. So their job is to, while get you better pay and get you better conditions. There are very rarely, I won't say never, because there might be something around here, it's very rarely tied to student achievement. And they don't want to tie incentives or finances or anything to achievement, because that makes things very, very difficult. I went on a tangent, fellas. David, it was supposed to be you, brother, but this topic has layers. And if you are a great teacher, though, I definitely want you to be paid. And I say this as a social worker who started his career making $32,000 a year. I feel you.
So the other wrench here is that at this school, in addition to the proposed $140,000 salary, there's also the opportunity to be eligible for an annual performance bonus of $35,000. So now we're getting close to like 200K people. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think, it's, you're talking about teacher unions. I could talk about them forever, but I will say that teacher unions, have done good work around raising teacher pay on average. The problem, and that's good for adults, right? The problem is there is zero accountability on the back end for children. It's just pay them more, and zero accountability. So I think in this situation, and I think you can isolate it to a particular teacher if you're talking about pay, or if you're talking about bonuses. A student is going to work with their teacher, and if they're in middle school or high school, they're going to work with a bunch of teachers, and they're going to maybe work with a learning specialist and maybe work with a tutor. So there are multiple adults working with children. However, if you have like advanced enough data systems and assessment systems, you can see where the learning's happening, right? And you can kind of track to who's responsible. So again, it's the same thing. It's I think teachers deserve to get paid more. I think this story is more of an outlier in a certain way. But regardless, I think it absolutely, if you're going to pay people more to do a job, that job has to be very clearly defined, and you have to demonstrate that you're actually effective at your job, period. And that means a deep culture of hard work, of extended professional development time. Again, I said this earlier, you can't just pay people more and expect better results. You're going to pay people more. You have to set higher expectations for them, and then measure results at the end. I was talking to a friend the other day who works in a California school district in Northern California, and we used to work together at a charter school. And he says it's incredible, man. It's 2023, and we have professional development on Friday afternoons. They have a minimum day. He says the principal's providing, or some specialist or an outside person is giving some kind of professional development, instruction. And when it hits 3:30, people just get up and leave the room, and the person's like still talking, man.
Yep, exactly.
Like they don't even say bye. They close their laptops and they just leave.
Yep.
And so that culture is just downright like rotten. And so if we're going to talk about raising teacher pay,
bro, like where have you not seen that culture other than in
I've seen it. I've seen it. I've never seen it in my schools.
But I'm saying, where I would strongly claim that we're the exception to that rule. Like, and I mean exception. Like, I was just going off about this yesterday. So I was talking to like one of my colleagues, and I was like, This is the work that has to be put into an organization that wants to fundamentally change education. And I was talking about my central office staff who was here of their own accord. I didn't keep them here. I didn't ask them to be here. I didn't schedule any of this stuff. All of them were here until 7 p.m. last night. That's insane. And I congratulated them all. And it's like, yo, this is what it takes. But yo, in any school district across the country, they'd have been like, absolutely not. Like, you either pay me or I'm out the door at 3:30 or 4. And it's just like, Doc, it goes back to what you said, which is, if you're going to pay this much, there must be some expectations, because everyone in the audience, every one of us here, what is the first thing that a teacher says when they're dealing with all this shit? You don't pay me enough for this. So solve it.
So what's the number? What's enough?
Pay you enough for this? And how
I'll
about
pay you more than enough?
Respect the profession, because then it's not just, and I think you're right about one thing. It's not that we can ultimately demand that all of a sudden they just shift scores without providing coaching, without providing support, without providing the infrastructure in order to get there. But I'm saying, let's pay them enough so they understand how much work has to be done to actually make highly effective advancements, especially in low-income kids. But if you pay them that much, get the junk out. All those teachers that are like, I'm just here for the vacation, get the fuck out of here, dude. All these teachers are like, I'm here for the benefits and I'm staying until I retire. Get the fuck out of here. Because if your answer is,
why would I? Those are great benefits. Why would I listen, man? Why would I leave that if the benefits are great and they're paid for, and I can operate at a suboptimal level?
But that's what I'm saying, Doc.
But I know,
if
but this is what I'm saying.
Paid them more, right? That way we get rid of the damn riffraff, because it becomes competitive. Because now someone's like, why would I leave? Because I got 10 other people that are hungrier, more qualified, and want this more than your ass, who's sitting here showing Gettysburg for 7 days in a row instead of actually teaching kids. That's why.
You know why I love movies. Movies is one of my favorite things. I have a theater. Like, I love movies. You know what helped me grow my love for movies is when I was in elementary school, and I had this one class, and if they didn't wheel that damn TV in with VCR strapped on, and we watched The Land Before Time. I've seen The Land Before Time, maybe a double-digit number. And my love for movies came in a classroom where I was supposed to be learning, and for whatever reason, that teacher was allowed to just have movie time almost every damn day. So, and here's the thing, and we know, listen, people will take this. I don't want to be hyperbolic. There are people in this traditional system that do go above and beyond, that do spend their own money, that do want to learn how to teach better, that are asking their colleagues to come in and observe them, and that want to grow. And they're probably mad at their district because they're probably not getting good PD. They're probably they probably feel unequipped because most teacher colleges don't actually teach you how to teach. They teach you some ideologies, but they don't teach you the nuts and bolts and the screws of actual teaching. And oh, by the way, and if they do get something right, they don't update that model in quick enough time, right? Usually when they update something, the thing is no longer even in style. I just say, as we are rolling down, if this works and kids are learning from it, I don't care. I live in a world where people get paid hundreds of millions of dollars to play football and basketball. So I can be normalized to this thing. But you know what else? Those people are subject to an incredible amount of scrutiny. Like in the NBA, there's somebody taking count of how many times you go left, how many times you go right, the way you breathe, when you get tired. And if you are the starting center and you only grab 5 rebounds when we need you to grab 17 rebounds, you are getting excoriated in the New York Times, in ESPN, on Fox. I was on the board of a hospital where these people are accountable to themselves, where you have to have malpractice insurance because you can be sued if you are bad at your job. And if you mess up on your job, you then have to go in front of your peers and walk through every single thing you did on said operation or whatever the case is. And you are judged by your peers based off of your performance. So I'd say to you, I have no problem, and I hope and pray that teachers can be paid like surgeons, like athletes, like the highest forms of society, that of people that are doing jobs that help us function as a people, as a superpower in this world. And
Right.
just know that sometimes you get what you ask for, and there are unintended consequences that come from that. And some people will get that and be praying for these days that you are in right now. I don't even need to do my final thought when we get around to it. That was it. That was just my whole thought. Sorry, my bad.
The doctor
I think-
just
I think-
served your ass.
What you're saying
Being honest.
what you're saying is I'm thinking about like more money, right? Proper money, right?
Mhm.
And then you truly professionalize the profession of teaching.
Yes.
And that means support, development,
Mhm.
resources, and outcomes. And you know, like making sure, like if we're doing this investment, you actually we're going to expect to see some kind of like demonstrable shift in student learning outcomes. The one thing that I was thinking about as well, I don't know if you probably are both familiar with it, but there's a national board certification for teachers,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
It's a way for it's a good process. Teachers go
I just
through it.
spoke to a group of board certified educators.
There you
But
go.
Yeah.
So thinking about a national board kind of certification process, like if we're gonna really professionalize the teaching profession and pay teachers, you know, this kind of money, there should be a requirement for every single teacher, maybe not to go through the national board process, but to do some kind of localized version of that, right? So they can actually do the deep reflection and analysis and learning of their own work and development as teachers, right?
But David,
it's not just like
your
more
haters
money.
are gonna say, but David, I'm gonna be your haters. Your haters are gonna
Go
say
ahead.
that's what certification is. That's what that's what that's for.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? Like that's why you have to be a certified teacher, even though traditional schools are the only ones that require certified teachers, and oftentimes they have lower outcomes and growth than private, which we can discount private because that tends to be skewed towards the wealthy
my
or
response
charter
to
schools.
my response to that is like the credential is the floor. It gets you in the door,
Mhm.
right?
Barely.
It gets you in the door. The admin credential, the teaching credential, the counseling credential, the special education credential. That's the floor. It's the baseline. So you really want to professionalize beyond that. Then you're looking at adding on additional like process, like I said, like a national board certification kind of light model, right? That everybody goes through. If you
Mhm.
really want to transform the profession of teaching
That's
and pay
I
them
mean,
to do it.
I'm all for it. Like, it's nuts because we're already going to do that ourselves. So like, I'm kind of taking a bit of a script off of like Uncommon, where they're like, we're going to create our own teacher professional program, and that's what Relay is. I'm like, yeah, I don't really agree with like Relay and the way Uncommon does things, but we have incredible practices that we want to employ in our teachers. And I'm like, hey man, why aren't we like certifying teachers? Because the teacher certification programs are dog shit. They're all theoretical. They don't teach you how to actually do anything in the classroom. None of it is actually worthwhile. And there's about 3 programs in the entirety of the country that have been assessed to actually be worthwhile teacher education programs. So everything else is just a dog shit, dirty, like cash cow. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll certify you. I'll get accredited by the state. I'll charge a fraction of what those programs are charging you, and I'll give you exponential levels of training. But that's where I'm at, because the level of training is so deplorable that I have to take this upon myself to do it. But that's a general statement about teaching. Like, if these programs aren't worthwhile, why are we funding them, and why are we allowing people to like be in these colleges of education if they're not actually teaching these teachers how to teach? Why are these education programs like cash cows? And again, it goes into like, they're paying all this money to get into a program that's going to not prepare them and get them into a profession where they're not being trained, they're not being coached, they're not like handling things with a union that is ultimately protecting the worst of the absolute worst. I mean, the union just protects sex offenders. Like, that's what the unions do. Like, go into New Jersey and handle your brain exploding for the amount of actual pedophiles and sex offenders that these unions are absolutely defending. That's what the unions do. They defend pedophiles and sex offenders and want to defend them to keep them in the classroom because that's how they keep power. And it's despicable, man, because that is what people don't want to get into. So I'm saying, man, if we were actually paying more and got a bigger wealth of people coming into the profession, then that comes with, like David said, a lot of training, coaching, support, more work days, more work hours, but holy smokes, are we getting immense results? And we make it, instead of what is kind of considered a trade, everyone's like, oh, teaching, that's a noble profession. I'm like, yo, like it should be as touted as a profession as doctors are, which they are in Japan, as lawyers are, which it is in the UK, and several other developed countries that just kind of figure this out to be like, yeah, if we're not educating our public, we're not going to be able to keep up economically. But again, this has a cultural component with the United States, because the United States is saying we don't actually need to educate our low-income kids because our middle-income kids and our high-income kids are going to be good. So why solve the educational crisis? Because as Caddyshack said, the world needs ditch diggers too. And that's what this country thinks about low-income education.
And we're rolling in the finals. If you want to roll in your final.
That is straight up my final. But what I do want to do is go back to a couple comments. One comment from a LinkedIn user, whomever you are, thank you for joining us. Yes, these shows are recorded. Mm-hmm. You can hit us up on YouTube and on Facebook. If you just look up, you can even Google the South Star Classroom, and all of our shows are there. I know the doctor and us are working on trying to get all of our previous shows into podcast format. And like Beyonce, one of these days we'll just be like, here's the dump. Here's all of our podcasts in audio format so you can re-listen and hear them in the podcast format. I know we're working on that because that's something that people can listen to in the car and not have to be attached to the computer for a live show. But hit us up on that YouTube and you'll be able to watch a fully recorded version of this show hereafter. To all of our guests, just want to give a huge shout out because the comments were badass. They were like on fleek, as the kids used to say. I don't think kids say that anymore. They were super on point. They don't, thank God, because that phrase sucks ass. The comments were just badass this week, man. You all were so on point. And look, I'm Every Jennifer. Thank you for joining us. Like, we got to get to a point where church volunteers don't have to volunteer to teach our kids how to read. How about our teachers teach our damn kids how to read and we pay them for it? So those are my final thoughts with a few minutes left. David, you want to take us home?
Yeah, sure. Again, when this story popped into our feed as a potential topic for the show, I went back and researched the article from 2011, and I was like, I wonder what happened to that school in 2011 that was paying teachers $125,000. And my brain goes straight to like, it must have shut down. But lo and behold, it's the same school, right? So they're doing something that's working. So I think it's worth continuing to look at. The bigger takeaway for me, I'm just thinking about, professionalizing teaching. And that means, again, like paying a good competitive wage to teachers that are professional, that deserve respect. But there also there just aren't any other types of careers that people can go into and, ask for respect without showing anything for it, right? So we have to get to the point where we're actually talking about demonstrating the impact of larger investments, whether it be into, facilities or materials or resources or teacher pay, which we're talking about today. So I think both of those have to go hand in hand. More money, more teacher pay, and then us getting very serious about accountability, because otherwise we're just kind of like repeating that that thing that's happening right now in Oakland, California. It's like every 2 years, we want more money. We want more money. We're going to go on strike. They're going to strike. They're going to get more money. And nobody is talking about how it will actually benefit children.
Man, and I agree with you. And listen, to the educators listening, just so our words are not misconstrued, I want you to get your money. Go get your money. Hell, I'll stand with you to get your money. And all the things that come with it, which include a different level of accountability to making sure that the jobs are happening. Because again, you could be coach of the year in 2020 and getting a pink slip on this fine Friday today. It's also because the Toronto Raptors want to go ahead and hire Ime Udoka, which I can understand. That's Omar. That's David. Jubilee is gallivanting around the globe right now. I am Charles, and we send her our love, and hopefully we'll have her back with us soon. Catch us next week, same bat time, same bat station. Y'all be smooth. Peace out.